30 days, $88,000, or I'm filing a lien and taking your property. That's the threat that landed on my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. From an HOA I never joined, for a ranch I bought at a county auction demanding money for rules I never agreed to follow. See, I'm Rex Dalton. I've been swinging hammers and fighting bureaucrats for 30 years. When I bought this 40-acre spread 6 months ago, it had been sitting empty for 3 years after the old farmer died. No HOA paperwork in sight, no mention of any association fees. But apparently, while I was fixing fences and clearing brush, some woman named Vivian decided my property belonged to her little kingdom. The smell of her designer perfume still lingered in my truck from when she'd visited to explain my obligations. What would you do if someone tried to steal your land with fake paperwork? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I bet half of you have your own HOA horror stories. Because what this lady didn't know was that I don't back down from bullies. And I definitely don't pay protection money. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name's Rex Dalton. I'm 52, and I've spent most of my adult life building things with my hands and fixing problems other people create. After my divorce finalized last year, I decided it was time to invest in something solid, land that nobody could take away from me. Famous last words, right? That's when I found the Mitchell place at a county auction. 40 acres of prime Texas pasture, a 1970s farmhouse that needed some love, and 2 barns that had seen better days but still had good bones. The previous owner, Clarence Mitchell, had been an old-school rancher who'd worked this land for decades before passing away 2 years earlier. The morning I first walked that property, gravel crunched under my boots as I surveyed what would become my retirement project. The diesel smell from Clarence's old tractors still hung in the barn air, and morning mist rolled across the pastures like something out of a postcard. When the prairie wind caught those creaking barn doors, I knew I was home. At $180,000, I got it for about half its market value. Clarence had died intestate, that's lawyer speak for no will, and his distant relatives couldn't afford the property taxes. Their loss was my gain, fair and square. My daughter Sage visits every other weekend, and she fell in love with the place immediately. "Dad, we could have horses," she said, already planning her sweet 16 party in the back pasture. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like I was building something that mattered. That piece lasted exactly 3 days. I was replacing rotted boards on the front porch when a pristine white BMW SUV came crunching up my gravel drive. Out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been assembled in a corporate boardroom. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her manicured hand. "Mr. Dalton, I'm Vivian Harwick, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association." She smiled the kind of smile that sells million-dollar houses and forecloses on dreams. "We need to discuss your responsibilities as our newest member." I set down my hammer and wiped sawdust off my hands. "I'm sorry, what association? There was no mention of any HOA in my purchase documents." Her smile got sharper, and I caught a whiff of her designer perfume, the kind that screams, "I make more in commissions than you make in a year." "Oh, but there was an automatic inclusion when we expanded our boundaries in 2018. Your property falls within our jurisdiction now." She handed me a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "There's a $2,400 initiation fee, plus $380 monthly dues. Retroactive, of course." See, what I didn't know yet was that Meadowbrook Estates was where the McMansion crowd lived. $2 million homes with manicured lawns and 3-car garages. And apparently, they'd decided us working ranch folks were bringing down their property values just by existing. "Ma'am, with respect, Clarence Mitchell never signed any of this." Mr. Mitchell's signature wasn't required. Her voice carried the dismissive tone reserved for people she considered beneath her social class. "Property boundaries speak louder than individual consent." That's when Sage poked her head out the front door. "Dad, who's the lady with the car that costs more than our house?" From the mouths of babes. After Vivian left, I talked to my neighbors, Bobby Chen and Maria Santos, both ranch families facing the same pressure. Turned out this wasn't about community standards. This was about forcing us out so developers could turn our land into more subdivisions. She picked the wrong rancher. 2 weeks later, I got my first taste of what Vivian considered clarification. The certified mail truck came rumbling down my gravel road at 7 in the morning, its engine coughing like an old man with too many cigarettes. The driver handed me an envelope so thick it could have stopped a bullet, and I could already smell trouble brewing stronger than my morning coffee. Inside was a formal lien notice against my property. "Notice of intent to foreclose," the letterhead screamed in bold red letters. Vivian was using Texas Property Code Section 209.006, something called HOA Super Lien Authority, to claim my ranch as collateral for her made-up debt. I had 30 days to pay the full $88,000 or she'd start foreclosure proceedings. Now, I've dealt with my share of bureaucratic nonsense over the years, but this was like watching someone try to steal your truck with a crayon drawing of the title. The audacity was almost impressive. My first stop was the county courthouse, where I spent 3 days buried in records that smelled like old paper and broken dreams. What I found made me madder than a hornet in a honey jar. The original ranch property predated the subdivision by 30 years. Clarence's land had been there since 1987, while Meadowbrook Estates was barely 5 years old. That's when I remembered something from a legal dispute I dealt with years ago on a construction project. The old-timer lawyer had told me about adverse possession. When property has been used continuously for a specific purpose for decades, you can't just retroactively slap new rules on it without proper legal notice. I made a mental note that anyone facing similar situations should research how long their property has been used for its current purpose before letting anyone change the rules. I spent another day photographing every original survey from 1987 and comparing them to the 2018 HOA boundary maps. Armed with this ammunition, I figured Vivian would back down once she realized her legal position was weaker than gas station coffee. I was wrong. Instead of retreating, she went nuclear. Within a week, I started getting phone calls from potential contracting clients asking if it was true that I didn't honor my legal obligations. 2 jobs I'd been counting on suddenly disappeared. But here's where Vivian made her first big mistake. When she started her whisper campaign at my daughter's school, she forgot one crucial detail. Small-town parents talk to each other, and they don't like bullies. My counterpunch was strategic. While she was busy spreading rumors, I was quietly building a legal fortress. I called property attorney Sarah Brennan, $300 an hour that hurt my wallet but opened my eyes. I also started documenting every single interaction with the HOA because I had a feeling I was going to need evidence later. "Rex," Sarah said after reviewing my documents, the leather of her office chair creaking as she leaned back. "You're sitting on a gold mine. This HOA overstepped their authority so badly they might as well have robbed a bank in broad daylight." She confirmed what I'd suspected about the adverse possession angle, and mentioned something every property buyer should know. You can always request all HOA documents before closing. It's legally required in most states. If they can't provide them, that's your first red flag. But the real game changer came when I reached out to Bobby Chen and Maria Santos, my neighboring ranchers dealing with similar pressure. Instead of fighting this battle alone, I was building an army. That's when Bobby dropped the bombshell that shifted the entire battlefield. "Rex," he said over coffee, the steam rising from our mugs like morning fog over his pasture. "This ain't about community standards. They expanded their boundaries specifically to include ranch properties. They need our fees to fund their $2.3 million community center project." He showed me meeting minutes from a public records request. The HOA was broke. Their grandiose plans had exceeded budget by 40%, and they were facing a special assessment that would cost each existing member over $10,000. Unless they could suddenly discover 12 ranch properties owing years of back dues. The math was beautiful in its corruption. 12 ranches times 80,000 equals nearly $1 million. Just enough to save their community center and Vivian's political reputation. And here's the kicker. Vivian's husband sat on the county planning commission that had approved the boundary expansion. I smiled for the first time in weeks, because I'd just figured out how to turn Vivian's greed into her downfall. She thought she was playing chess, but I was about to flip the board. Vivian's next move proved she was either desperate or stupid. Probably both. 3 days after my meeting with Sarah, I got a call from Pinnacle Recovery Services, one of those bottom-feeder collection agencies that make their money terrorizing people who can't fight back. The woman on the phone had a voice like gravel in a blender and about as much charm. "Mr. Dalton, this is regarding your delinquent HOA account. We're prepared to garnish wages and seize assets if this matter isn't resolved within 72 hours. I almost laughed. "Ma'am, you might want to check your legal standing before you threaten someone. This debt is disputed, and your client knows it." The harassment escalated quickly. Daily phone calls during dinner, automated messages about my legal obligations, and they even had the audacity to show up at one of my job sites, embarrassing me in front of a client who could smell the desperation on them like cheap cologne. That's when Vivian made her second big mistake. She decided to take her campaign public. The monthly HOA meeting was held in their fancy community center, the one they apparently needed my money to finish paying for. Vivian called a special session to discuss delinquent accounts, and according to Maria Santos, who attended as a guest, it was quite a performance. She had a whole PowerPoint about you, Maria told me later. Pictures of your property claiming you were running an illegal business, saying you were destroying property values. Then she posted it all on Nextdoor. I pulled up the post on my phone. There was my ranch, photographed from the road, with a caption about deadbeat neighbors who refused to contribute. The comments section had become a digital battlefield. Now, I've learned something over the years about fighting bullies. Sometimes you have to let them think they're winning while you prepare your knockout punch. So instead of getting mad, I got methodical. I remembered something from a city council dispute I'd worked on. These HOAs operate like mini governments, which means they have to follow transparency rules. I filed a formal public records request demanding 3 years of financial documents, because any homeowner has the right to see where their money goes. The smell of fresh ink and photocopier toner filled my kitchen as I spread boxes of documents across my table. What I found was better than Christmas morning for someone who loves catching thieves. $40,000 in consulting fees to Harwick Properties, Vivian's own company. Another $30,000 to Santos Landscaping, which took me 5 minutes on Google to discover was owned by her brother-in-law. The community center had somehow grown from $1.8 million to $2.3 million with zero competitive bidding records. But the real smoking gun was buried in board meeting minutes. 3 months ago, Vivian had proposed a special assessment of $12,000 per household to cover overruns. The motion failed when homeowners threatened to recall the entire board. 2 weeks later, they mysteriously discovered that ranch properties owed back dues. While I was building my financial case, Vivian was busy making hers worse. She started photographing violations throughout the neighborhood, but only targeting people who defended me. A mailbox supposedly the wrong beige. Grass allegedly 3/4 inch too tall. The irony was delicious. Her own house had a hot tub violating setback requirements, and her lawn showed signs of commercial irrigation during water restrictions. I started my own documentation project because two could play the rules game. I also filed a complaint with the state attorney general. Since HOA board members have fiduciary duty, they're legally required to act in the community's interest, not line their own pockets. My weekly coffee meetings had grown from 3 ranchers to 12 families, and word was spreading. Parents at Sage's school started asking questions. Local business owners began choosing sides. The community was waking up to what Vivian really was. Her response was predictable. A cease and desist letter demanding I stop harassing board members by asking about their financial decisions. Her attorney, probably costing more per hour than I made in a week, threatened legal action for my campaign of intimidation. I had Sarah draft a response that was basically a legal way of saying bring it on, because by then I'd realized something important. Vivian wasn't just corrupt, she was cornered. And desperate people make the biggest mistakes. I could practically hear the trap snapping shut. She just didn't know it yet. If I thought Vivian was desperate before, I was about to learn what real desperation looked like. It started with boot prints in the frost. I woke up one Wednesday morning to find fresh footprints circling my barn, leading right up to the windows where someone had clearly been peering inside. The grass was still stiff with morning cold, and whoever had been snooping around had left a trail clear as day, including cigarette butts that definitely weren't mine. I grabbed my camera and documented everything, because by now I'd learned that with Vivian, today's trespassing was tomorrow's evidence. The boot prints led to tire tracks by my back fence, where someone had parked and walked onto my property in the dead of night. 2 days later, I got a call from the electric company claiming I was running a commercial operation without proper permits. According to their anonymous tip, I was operating heavy machinery and needed to upgrade to industrial service, at about 4 times the cost. The inspector who showed up took one look at my 50-year-old tractor and Clarence's rusted equipment and shook his head. Whoever called this in was either lying or stupid. You've got the most residential setup I've seen on a ranch this size. But Vivian wasn't done playing games. My mail started arriving late, when it arrived at all. HOA notices somehow kept getting delivered to the wrong addresses by accident, and I had to chase down important documents that had been scattered across 3 different neighbors' mailboxes. The woman was like a mosquito, annoying, persistent, and just smart enough to be dangerous. That's when she made her biggest tactical error yet. Vivian decided to involve the county in her little war. I was replacing a section of fence when a county inspector pulled up in a white truck with official plates. He climbed out with a clipboard and a confused expression, like he wasn't quite sure why he was there. "Mr. Dalton, I'm here about reports of zoning violations. Someone claims you're running unauthorized commercial activities." I wiped the sweat off my forehead and gestured toward my equipment. "You mean fixing my own fence?" "Yeah, I'm guilty of property maintenance." The inspector spent an hour walking my land, checking structures, and taking notes. At the end, he handed me a clean bill of health and a piece of information that made my day. "Just so you know, whoever filed this complaint also reported that the Meadowbrook Community Center is operating as an event venue without proper permits. I'll be checking that out next week." I tried to keep the smile off my face. "That's interesting. I hope you find everything in order." The irony was perfect. While Vivian was trying to get me in trouble for imaginary violations, her own precious community center was actually breaking the law by hosting weddings and corporate events without the required licenses. But my real breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the courthouse records I'd been digging through for weeks. Buried in a misfiled folder from 1987, I found a document that changed everything. It was the original restrictive covenant between the developer and existing ranch owners, written when the first subdivision lots were platted. Right there in black and white, it stated that existing agricultural properties maintain perpetual exemption from homeowners association governance. I read that sentence 3 times, the musty smell of old paper suddenly smelling sweet as victory. This wasn't just about adverse possession or proper notice anymore. This was ironclad legal protection that had been sitting in the county files for 35 years. Clarence Mitchell's property, my property, was legally bulletproof. I made copies of everything and drove straight to Sarah's office, where the leather chairs suddenly felt a lot more comfortable. "Rex," she said after reviewing the documents, "this is better than we hoped. You're not just protected from their current demands. You're immune from any future HOA authority. Forever." The document was signed by the original developer, making it binding on all successor entities, including Vivian's HOA. They had no legal standing whatsoever to govern ranch properties, collect fees, or impose liens. But here's where it got really good. As a real estate agent, Vivian was legally required to know about existing covenants and exemptions. The Texas Real Estate Commission has strict disclosure requirements, and filing a lien against property she knew was exempt could cost her professional license. I had her dead to rights, but instead of revealing my ace in the hole immediately, I decided to let her keep digging her own grave. Every day she continued her harassment campaign was another day of documented misconduct. My property was protected, my legal position was unassailable, and Vivian was about to learn that sometimes the quiet guy with the hammer knows exactly how to use it. The only question now was how spectacular I wanted to make her public downfall. And after months of harassment, threats, and lies, I was feeling pretty creative. The trap was loaded. Time to let her walk into it. The moment I found that document, everything changed. I sat in Sarah's office holding 35-year-old papers that smelled like victory and old courthouse filing cabinets, while she explained just how bulletproof my position had become. "This isn't just a technicality, Rex," Sarah said, tapping the covenant with her pen. "This is a legally binding agreement between the original developer and all existing ranch owners. When your neighbor Clarence bought his land in 1987, this exemption became part of the property deed forever." The beauty of it was in the language. Perpetual exemption from homeowners association governance didn't leave much room for interpretation. It meant that no matter how many times the HOA expanded their boundaries, no matter what new rules they invented, my ranch was legally untouchable. But the implications went deeper than just my property. "Here's what makes this really interesting," Sarah continued, pulling out a county map. "According to this covenant, there are 11 other ranch properties with identical protections. Vivian isn't just wrong about your case. She's been illegally harassing a dozen families for months. I thought about Bobby Chen, Maria Santos, and all the other ranchers who'd been fighting the same battle. Not one of us owed the HOA a single penny. Not one of us was legally subject to their authority. Vivian had built her entire financial recovery plan on a foundation of fraud. The legal exposure for the HOA was staggering. Every lien they'd filed was invalid. Every fee they'd collected from ranch owners was theft. Every harassment campaign was actionable under state and federal law. And Vivian? As a licensed real estate agent, she was required by the Texas Real Estate Commission to research and disclose all existing covenants before any transaction. The fact that she'd filed liens against protected properties wasn't just misconduct. It was potentially criminal. "She had to know," Sarah said. Any competent real estate professional would have found these documents during basic due diligence. The fact that she proceeded anyway suggests either gross negligence or intentional fraud. I started understanding the bigger picture. This wasn't just about collecting back dues from ranchers. Vivian and her HOA board had painted themselves into a financial corner with their grandiose community center project. When the budget exploded and homeowners refused a special assessment, they needed a scapegoat. Ranch owners were perfect targets. We lived outside the main subdivision, we didn't attend HOA meetings, and most of us were blue-collar folks who might not have the resources to fight back legally. Vivian had counted on intimidating us into paying without examining the legal foundation of her claims. She'd picked the wrong group to bully. The discovery also explained why Vivian's husband had been so eager to approve the HOA boundary expansion on the County Planning Commission. They needed official documentation to make their land grab look legitimate, even though the underlying covenant made it illegal. "What do you want to do with this information?" Sarah asked. I thought about months of harassment, threats against my business, attempts to humiliate my daughter, and all the other ranch families who'd been put through the same nightmare. I thought about Vivian's smug smile and her assumption that I was just another working-class guy she could steamroll. "I want to give her enough rope to hang herself," I said. "How long can we sit on this before revealing it?" "Legally, as long as you want. Strategically, I'd wait until she commits to her position so completely that backing down becomes impossible." I smiled, thinking about the HOA meeting scheduled for next week, where Vivian planned to present her final demands to the ranch coalition. Perfect timing. The next 3 weeks were like preparing for the most important construction project of my life, except instead of building something, I was going to tear down Vivian's entire world. Sarah and I met every Tuesday at her office, the conference table gradually disappearing under stacks of legal documents, evidence files, and strategic plans. She'd switched from hourly billing to a contingency fee arrangement, always a good sign when your lawyer is willing to bet on your case. "We're going multi-pronged," she explained, spreading out a timeline across the mahogany surface. Civil harassment claims, professional misconduct complaints, potential criminal referrals, and a class action suit representing all affected ranch families. The damage calculation alone was staggering. Lost contracting income from Vivian's sabotage campaign, $32,000. Legal fees and emotional distress, another $40,000. But the real money was in the class action potential. 12 families, each with similar damages, facing months of illegal harassment. We could be looking at over $1 million in recoverable damages. Meanwhile, I turned my kitchen into mission control. Bobby Chen, with his military logistics background, helped me organize 3 years of HOA documents into a chronological database. Every suspicious expense, every no-bid contract, every violation of fiduciary duty was cataloged with military precision. Maria Santos, who'd taught high school for 30 years before retiring, coordinated our community outreach campaign. She knew how to organize people and, more importantly, how to educate them about their rights without boring them to death. "People need to understand this isn't just about ranch properties," she said over coffee one morning, her kitchen table covered with flyers and email lists. "If Vivian can steal from us, she can steal from anyone." The financial analysis kept getting worse for the HOA. Bobby's spreadsheets showed a pattern of nepotism and corruption that would make a Chicago alderman blush. Vivian's consulting company had received 40% of all major contract awards. Her brother-in-law's landscaping business had been paid triple the market rate for basic maintenance. But the smoking gun was a payment I'd almost missed, $15,000 to Strategic Communications LLC for community relations consulting. 5 minutes of internet research revealed that Strategic Communications was owned by Vivian's college roommate and had no other business presence besides a Gmail address. They'd literally invented a fake company to funnel HOA money to their friends. My daughter Sage had become an unexpected ally in our media strategy. At 17, she understood social platforms better than any of us old-timers, and she'd been quietly documenting Vivian's harassment campaign on TikTok. Her videos about HOA Karens trying to steal our ranch had gone mini-viral in our area, with over 50,000 views. "Dad, you've got to let me speak at the HOA meeting," she said one evening while we reviewed her footage. "My generation gets it. This is about bullies with clipboards thinking they can control everyone." The media component was coming together beautifully. Amanda Torres from Channel 8 had agreed to do a full investigative piece, scheduled to air the night before the big HOA meeting. She'd already interviewed 6 ranch families and had obtained copies of all our financial evidence. This story has everything, Amanda told me during our last planning call. Corruption, David versus Goliath drama, and a community fighting back against injustice. My editor is talking about entering it for a journalism award. But my favorite part of the strategy was the simplest. Instead of just defending against Vivian's attacks, we were going on offense. Sarah had prepared individual cease and desist orders for each board member, demanding they stop their harassment campaigns and return all illegally collected fees. We'd calculated restitution amounts for every affected family, documented every violation of state HOA laws, and prepared a comprehensive complaint for the Attorney General's office that read like a criminal indictment. The beauty was in the timing. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. Amanda's news story would air Wednesday evening. Sarah would file our legal papers Thursday morning, and I would walk into that meeting with 12 ranch families, boxes of evidence, and a room full of reporters. During our final strategy session, I asked Sarah the question that had been bothering me for weeks. What if she tries to settle quietly before the meeting? Then we'll know we've won, Sarah replied. But honestly, Rex, I don't think Vivian's personality allows for quiet surrender. She's going to fight this thing all the way to the bottom. I thought about the woman who'd threatened to steal my property over fake fees, who'd tried to destroy my business with lies, who'd attempted to humiliate my daughter at school. Good, I said, because I want everyone in that room to see exactly who she really is. The trap was set, the evidence was organized, and Vivian was about to walk into the most public humiliation of her life. I couldn't wait. While we were planning her downfall, Vivian was busy making sure her own destruction would be as spectacular as possible. It started with sabotage that was almost too obvious to believe. I walked out to my barn one Thursday morning to find sugar in my tractor's fuel tank. Amateur hour stuff that would have been funny if it wasn't my equipment. The diesel engine coughed and wheezed like an old man with pneumonia before finally giving up completely. But Vivian wasn't content with just property damage. She escalated to utility warfare, calling the water department to claim I was running a commercial operation that required industrial service rates. When that failed, she tried to get my electrical service disconnected, filing reports about unpermitted structures that existed only in her imagination. The county inspector who showed up looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Dalton, I've got complaints here about unauthorized construction, commercial water usage, and zoning violations. Mind if I take a look around? 20 minutes later, he was shaking his head and muttering about frivolous complaints. Whoever's filing these reports is wasting everyone's time. Your property is cleaner than most residential lots I inspect. That's when the inspector dropped a bombshell that made my week. Actually, while I'm here, I should mention we found some interesting issues at that community center. Turns out they've been operating an illegal event venue without proper permits. We're looking at some serious violations. I tried to keep the satisfaction off my face while Vivian's own harassment campaign backfired beautifully. But she wasn't done digging her own grave. The next week, she invited me to lunch at the hometown diner. Neutral ground, she said, to discuss a reasonable settlement. I showed up with my phone recording legally, since Texas is a one-party consent state. What happened next was better than Christmas and my birthday combined. Rex, she said, stirring her salad with the intensity of someone plotting world domination, I think we can resolve this situation quietly. The HOA is prepared to offer you $25,000 to settle this matter and relocate somewhere more suitable to your lifestyle. The words hung in the air like the smell of burnt coffee from the kitchen. She was literally trying to bribe me to move away. That's interesting, Vivian. Are you saying the HOA doesn't actually have legal authority over my property? Her perfectly painted smile cracked just slightly. I'm saying that sometimes it's easier to avoid expensive legal battles. This could get very messy for everyone involved. I leaned back in the cracked vinyl booth, savoring the moment. So let me understand this. You're offering me money to leave property that you claim I legally owe you money for living on? I'm offering you a way out before this becomes unpleasant. Every word was recorded, every admission documented. She'd just confessed that the HOA lacked legal authority over ranch properties, and she was willing to pay to make the problem disappear. Meanwhile, her community intimidation campaign was reaching new levels of desperation. HOA members were organizing boycotts of local businesses that supported me. Fake social media accounts started spreading rumors about my character, my parenting, and my financial stability. The most pathetic attempt was trying to get Sage excluded from homecoming court at school. Apparently, being the daughter of a deadbeat neighbor made her unsuitable for high school honors. That's where Vivian finally overplayed her hand. She filed a false police report claiming I'd threatened her at the grocery store, complete with tearful testimony about feeling unsafe in her own community. Deputy Mike Harrison, who'd known me for years, took the report seriously enough to pull the store's security footage. The video showed me buying groceries while Vivian was in a completely different section of the store. We hadn't even been in the same aisle, much less had any interaction. "Rex," Deputy Harrison said when he called to clear up the matter, "I've got to tell you, filing false police reports is a felony in Texas. She's looking at some serious legal exposure here." I filed a formal harassment complaint with the sheriff's department, providing comprehensive documentation of months of stalking behavior. Sarah also helped me get a restraining order protecting my family and property from further interference. But the pressure campaign was backfiring in ways Vivian hadn't anticipated. 3 HOA board members resigned rather than be associated with her tactics. The local newspaper editor started investigating the corruption story after receiving tips from multiple sources. Even county commissioners were distancing themselves from the HOA expansion they'd approved, with one calling for a formal review of the boundary changes. By the time I finished documenting Vivian's latest round of illegal harassment, I had enough evidence to put her away for years. The woman had committed multiple felonies while trying to steal property she had no legal claim to. She thought she was playing hardball, but she was actually building her own prison cell one stupid decision at a time. With less than a week before the showdown, Vivian went completely off the rails. I woke up Tuesday morning to find a chain-link fence stretching across my access road, not near it, not beside it, but directly blocking the only way to reach my property from the county road. Posted along the fence were bright yellow no trespassing signs with Vivian's HOA contact information, as if she'd claimed ownership of my own driveway. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd literally fenced me off from my own land. I called the sheriff's department, and Deputy Harrison arrived within an hour, shaking his head as he surveyed the illegal barrier. The smell of fresh-cut metal and new vinyl signs hung in the morning air like evidence of desperation. "Rex, I've seen some property disputes in my time, but this takes the cake. She's got about as much right to block your access as I do to park my cruiser in her living room." The fence came down that afternoon, hauled away by a very confused contractor who'd apparently been told it was routine boundary maintenance. But Vivian wasn't done with her final desperate gambit. She hired a Dallas law firm, one of those downtown outfits that charge more per hour than most people make in a month, to send me a cease and desist letter that read like a legal threat from another planet. "Our client demands immediate cessation of your harassment campaign against the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board," the letter stated, printed on letterhead thick enough to stop bullets. "Failure to comply will result in aggressive legal action seeking damages in excess of $50,000. They were demanding I stop asking questions about public financial records. They wanted me to cease intimidating board members by attending public meetings. Most hilariously, they threatened to sue me for intentional infliction of emotional distress because I documented their clients' illegal activities." Sarah's response was a masterpiece of legal sarcasm wrapped in professional language. Essentially, she told them to bring it on while simultaneously informing them that their client was about to face criminal charges for multiple felonies. But Vivian's most desperate move was also her most revealing. She started conducting late-night reconnaissance missions on my property, captured in high-definition glory by the trail cameras I'd installed months earlier. The footage was almost comic, Vivian creeping around my barn at midnight like some suburban ninja, using her phone's flashlight to peer through windows and photograph equipment. She even tried to open my tool shed, apparently looking for evidence of the imaginary commercial operation she'd been claiming I was running. Every trespassing incident was documented with timestamps and GPS coordinates. Every violation was another felony charge waiting to happen. The woman was building her own legal destruction one midnight prowl at a time. Meanwhile, the community mobilization reached its peak. All 12 ranch families had united behind our legal action, pooling resources for attorney fees and coordinating media interviews. Local businesses were openly supporting us with window signs reading, "We support rural rights." The political pressure was becoming impossible to ignore. County commissioners were facing angry calls from constituents who'd learned about the HOA corruption. The Attorney General's office had opened a formal investigation. Even the state legislature was asking questions about HOA oversight and abuse prevention. But my favorite development was watching Vivian's own support network crumble. Her remaining board members were jumping ship faster than rats leaving a sinking vessel. Her brother-in-law's landscaping company suddenly found their HOA contract under review. Even her fancy Dallas lawyers started hedging their language as they realized their client had no defensible legal position. The media attention was reaching regional levels. Amanda Torres's investigation had expanded into a three-part series about HOA corruption across Texas. Other news outlets were picking up the story, framing it as a David and Goliath battle between working families and corrupt suburban power structures. Social media was brutal for Vivian. Sage's TikTok videos had inspired copycat content from other teens dealing with HOA harassment. The hashtag #HOA was trending locally, with hundreds of people sharing their own stories of association, overreach, and abuse. By Wednesday afternoon, I had everything I needed: criminal evidence, civil claims worth over $1 million, professional misconduct documentation, and a community united behind justice. Vivian had committed multiple felonies, violated state and federal laws, and destroyed her own professional reputation through documented illegal activities. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night at 7 p.m. Amanda's investigative report would air at 6. Sarah would file our legal papers Thursday morning, ensuring maximum media coverage. Vivian thought she was fighting for her community's financial future. What she'd actually done was guarantee her own professional, legal, and social destruction. The trap was closing, and she'd built every piece of it herself. Tomorrow night, everyone would see exactly who Vivian Harwick really was. Thursday, 7 p.m. The Meadowbrook Estates Community Center was packed tighter than a construction site porta-potty, with every seat filled and people standing along the walls. The air hummed with tension and the low murmur of neighbors who'd watched Amanda Torres's devastating investigative report just an hour earlier. I walked through the front doors with Sarah, our surveyor, and all 11 Ranch Coalition families behind me. We carried boxes of evidence, presentation materials, and 35 years of legal documentation that would change everything. The crowd parted like we were pallbearers at a funeral, which, in a way, we were. Vivian sat at the board table looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the stress lines, and her designer outfit seemed wrinkled, despite probably costing more than my monthly mortgage. The remaining 2 board members flanked her like uncomfortable bodyguards who'd rather be anywhere else. Deputy Harrison stood near the back wall, official and imposing. Amanda Torres and her camera crew occupied the front row, while other reporters scattered throughout the room with notebooks and recording devices. Sage sat with about 20 of her classmates, all wearing Support Rural Rights t-shirts and ready to document everything for social media. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivian began, her voice carrying less authority than usual, "tonight we address the delinquent accounts that threaten our community's financial stability." I stood up, and the room went dead silent. "Ma'am, I'd like equal time to respond to these accusations, if you don't mind." Ooh. Vivian's smile looked like it was carved from ice. "Mr. Dalton, this is a private HOA meeting. You have no standing here." "Actually," Sarah said, rising beside me, "my client has every right to address claims made against his property. Texas law is quite clear on this." I walked to the front of the room and connected my laptop to their projection system. The first image that appeared was the 1987 Developer Covenant, blown up large enough for everyone to read. "This document," I said, pointing to the screen, "grants perpetual exemption from homeowners association governance to all existing agricultural properties. That includes my ranch and 11 others that your board has been illegally harassing for months." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Vivian's face went white as fresh paint. "This covenant was signed before most of you moved to this community. It's been sitting in the county files for 35 years, and as a licensed real estate agent, Mrs. Harwick was legally required to know about it." I clicked to the next slide, a breakdown of the HOA's financial irregularities. $40,000 to Vivian's own company, $30,000 to her brother-in-law, $15,000 to a fake consulting firm owned by her college roommate. "Your board president hasn't just been stealing from ranch owners," I continued. "She's been stealing from all of you." The room erupted in angry murmurs. Several homeowners stood up, demanding explanations. Vivian looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. "These are fabricated documents," she shouted, her composure finally cracking. "This man has been harassing our board for months, trespassing on private property, intimidating community members." That's when I played the recording from our restaurant meeting. "Rex, I think we can resolve this situation quietly. The HOA is prepared to offer you $25,000 to settle this matter and relocate somewhere more suitable to your lifestyle." Vivian's own voice filled the room through the community center's sound system, clear as a church bell on Sunday morning. The admission that she'd tried to bribe me to leave property she claimed I legally owed money for was devastating. "Are you saying the HOA doesn't actually have legal authority over my property?" my recorded voice asked. "I'm saying that sometimes it's easier to avoid expensive legal battles." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the soft whir of news cameras capturing every moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Deputy Harrison announced from the back, "I'm here to inform you that Mrs. Harwick is under active criminal investigation for harassment, filing false police reports, and multiple counts of trespassing." Sarah stepped forward with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "I'm also serving notice that we're filing a class action lawsuit against the HOA board for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Damages are calculated at over $1 million. The crowd turned on Vivian like sharks smelling blood. Homeowners demanded her immediate resignation. People shouted questions about the missing money. Camera flashes lit up the room like a lightning storm. "This is all lies!" Vivian screamed, standing up so fast her chair fell backward. "You people don't understand what I've sacrificed for this community." But nobody was listening anymore. The remaining board members were already distancing themselves, publicly calling for her resignation. Homeowners were demanding emergency elections and financial audits. I looked at Vivian across that room, the woman who'd tried to steal my land, destroy my business, and humiliate my family, and felt nothing but pity. "The truth has a way of coming out," I said into the microphone. "Always does." Vivian's resignation letter hit my email at 11:47 p.m. that same night. 3 paragraphs of lawyer-written nonsense that basically said, "I quit," in the most expensive way possible. Within 48 hours, the legal settlement was finalized. $180,000 split between me and the other affected ranch families, plus full restitution of all illegally collected fees. Vivian's real estate license was suspended pending investigation, and the district attorney filed felony harassment charges that would keep her busy with lawyers for the next year. The HOA got a complete board makeover. New elections brought in people who actually understood the word community, including Maria Santos as the new president and Bobby Chen as treasurer. Their first official act was passing bylaws that formally recognized ranch property exemptions and established transparent financial oversight. My contracting business didn't just recover, it exploded. Turns out standing up to bullies makes for great marketing. I had more work than I could handle, with clients specifically requesting the guy who took down the corrupt HOA. Even picked up 3 projects from Meadowbrook residents who wanted to distance themselves from Vivian's legacy. The personal healing took longer than the legal victory. Sage and I spent a lot of evenings on the front porch, watching the sun set over our protected land and talking about what we'd learned. She'd gained confidence from fighting injustice, and I'd discovered that sometimes the quiet guy with the hammer can make the most noise when it matters. 6 months later, the community had transformed completely. The Ranch Coalition had evolved into something bigger, a regional property rights organization helping other families fight HOA overreach across 3 counties. We'd successfully challenged 4 similar cases, armed with legal precedents and hard-won experience. But the best part was what we did with that disputed land. Remember that community center project that started this whole mess? The new HOA board voted to convert the undeveloped portion into something the whole area could enjoy: the Clarence Mitchell Community Garden and Nature Preserve. 40 acres of native plants, walking trails, and garden plots that anyone could use, regardless of where they lived or what HOA they belonged to. We funded it with Vivian's settlement money and turned it into a scholarship program for local kids interested in agriculture or construction trades. Every year, 10 students get help with college or trade school tuition, funded by the woman who tried to steal our land. The irony was perfect. The annual Ranch Heritage Festival became our biggest community success. Every October, we celebrate agricultural history with live music, local food, and educational booths about property rights and government accountability. Last year, over 3,000 people attended, including state legislators who'd helped pass new HOA oversight laws inspired by our case. My favorite moment came during the second festival, when a young father approached me with his son in tow. "Mr. Dalton, I wanted to thank you. We were about to get bullied out of our home by an HOA in the next county until we heard your story. We fought back using your playbook, and we won. That's when I knew we'd built something bigger than just winning a legal case." The media attention had national impact. Amanda Torres's investigation won a regional journalism award and inspired similar investigations across the country. Congress even held hearings about HOA abuse prevention, with our case cited as evidence of the need for federal oversight. These days I wake up every morning on land that nobody can take away. in a community that's learned the difference between leadership and bullying. Sage is thriving in college, studying environmental law, with plans to help other families protect their property rights. The best revenge isn't getting even, it's building something better than what was there before. So here's my challenge to you. If you've got an HOA nightmare story, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of you might just find yourselves featured in future videos about fighting back against corruption and standing up for what's right. And hey, if this story inspired you or taught you something about dealing with bullies in positions of power, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're exposing corruption and fighting for the little guy every single week, because somebody's got to stand up to the Vivians of the world. Sometimes the best construction project is tearing down something that never should have been built in the first place.